Then we're going to be setting lines in a plane. We will be able to find the slopes of lines, find the equations of lines, and identify parallel and perpendicular lines. First, slope. When we're talking about a coordinate plane, we always want to consider the change in y over the change in x. You can also think of it as an equation if you have 2 points, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. This should not be new to you. This is an Algebra 1 topic. Let's determine the slope of this line. It doesn't matter which point is your first point and which point is your second point. The key thing is that you stay in the same order every time. So the differences in my y's would be 1 minus 0 over 3 minus negative 2. 1 minus 0 is 1. 3 minus negative 2 is the same as 3 plus 2, which is 5. So the slope between these 2 points is 1/5. Or rising 1 and running 5. We have 3 different ways that we typically express lines. The first one is standard form. That is known as ax plus by equals c. Whenever we're graphing lines, we typically have an x and a y. A, b, and c are all constant numbers, and they all have to be integers. The next form that we have is point-slope form. That is expressed y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1, where x1 and y1 represent values of a point, and m is the slope. And finally, the most common one that you see used is slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. Now, any one of these ways are perfectly acceptable ways to write equations of lines. So make sure that you are always referring to the directions to make sure that you are putting things in the proper form. Write the equation of the line that passes through -2, 0, and 3, 1 in all 3 forms. So the first thing we have to do is find the slope. And we actually found the slope in our previous example. M equals 1/5. And again, any form is the correct way to express this line. I'll start with point-slope form because I know a slope and I know a point. I will use this point for my point-slope form, but technically you could use either one. So y minus 1 equals 1/5 x minus 3. And that would be point-slope form. To express this in y-intercept form, I could go through and find the y-intercept, or I can simply solve this slope-intercept form, or this point-slope form for y to get slope-intercept form. So the first thing I'll do is I will distribute the 1/5. So I still have the y minus 1, and then 1/5 x times 3/5. Now I'll add the 1 to both sides. So y equals 1/5 x minus, and then negative 3/5 plus 1, or 5/5 would be 2/5. That's slope-intercept form. Now the last one is standard form. In standard form, you have to have all integers. So the first thing I'm going to do before I do anything is get rid of the fractions. You can always multiply to get rid of fractions. Look at the denominators and think of the common denominator between all the numbers. So in this case, my common denominator is 5. So in this equation, I'm going to multiply everything by 5. This will get rid of my fractions. So it's 5y equals 5 times 1/5 is just 1. And then 5 times 2/5 is 2. Also, in standard form, x's and y's are on the same side. And we want the x to be positive. So I'm actually going to subtract the 5y over. And then move the 2 over to the other side by subtracting. And there you have it. You have the same line in 3 different forms. It is important, as a mathematical student, that you know the difference between parallel and perpendicular lines. Parallel lines have the same slope. They never touch each other. Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. We meet at a right angle. Determine a line that is A parallel and B perpendicular to 2x minus 3y equals 5 and passes through the point 2 minus 1. Again, the directions don't actually tell me what form to put the line in, so I can use whatever I want. But before I can figure out a parallel and a perpendicular line, I need to know the slope. Right now I'm in standard form. It would be in my best interest to convert this into slope-intercept form by getting y by itself. So there's the same line in slope-intercept form. The slope of this particular line is 2/3, which means that the parallel slope to this line also has to be 2/3. So if I want a slope, or I want a line that's parallel to this line and passes through this point, the easiest way to do that is to use point-slope form. So y minus -1 or plus 1 equals 2/3 x minus 2. So it's the parallel line. Perpendicular slopes are opposite reciprocals. So I need to take this 2/3, flip the fraction, that's the reciprocal part, and change the sign. So negative 2/3. And again, it still passes through this point. So I have y plus 1 equals negative 3/2 times x minus 2. And there we have it. Our parallel and perpendicular lines. If you have any questions, please feel free to write them down and we will go over them in class.